Hi there guys. Last year, I 3D printed Archer and Chip Hazard from one of my favourite childhood movies, Small Soldiers. I got some great comments on the Chip Hazard video, and as correctly guessed by the user Magic Mindstorm, today I'll be making one of the Gorgonite figures, Insaniac. The user Mediocre Beast YT also asked if it was possible to make a proper action figure with moving joints, and I'm happy to say I'll be attempting that as well. The Insaniac file I'm printing is available on the Epic Props VIP store. I'll include the link in the description box below. To print all the various pieces of this Insaniac required 5 separate prints on my Elegoo Saturn 8K resin printer. The first print was the head and body, which I arranged in the Cheeto box slicer. I wanted this figure to have a real weight to it, so I didn't hollow any of the pieces. I used Elegoo's own water washable 8K resin for all 5 prints. Once each print was finished, I removed the pieces from the build plate and removed the support material. I then put them in the wash station, and once they were dry, I did the final curing in the UV curing station. This Insaniac file came with an open left hand and a closed fist right hand, but I wanted the option to be able to swap these hands out. All I did to achieve this was mirror each hand in the Cheeto box slicer, and here on this second print you can see the 2 open hands, and later on I printed 2 closed fists. The body has a cavity in the neck where the head joins on. Apparently this is so you can install a motor for the head to spin round, like in the movie. Considering I can't wire an LED light to a battery pack yet, I'll be avoiding motors at the moment. However, I glued in this 18mm wooden dowel to fill in the cavities and added a strong magnet to each side to allow the head to rotate. To help keep the dowel and magnets in place, I filled in any gaps with milliput and later sanded it back for 2 flat surfaces. The next step in adding articulation to this figure was the hands. I removed these resin pegs, which were a loose fit, and added magnets instead, so both the open and closed hands could be swapped out on each arm. I wanted to give you a quick look at the shoulder joints. These work as a hinge that will be held in place with a wooden dowel through a hole in each shoulder. As you can see, the ball joint section that connects to the body didn't print correctly in resin, so I'll be reprinting these pieces with my FDM printer later. It was then onto the hip joints, where I had the same issues. As you can see, the sphere sections didn't print correctly in resin, but rather than reprint the entire hip section, we'll be replacing these connection points with metal. After measuring the correct width with digital calipers, I cut the pegs and drilled a straight hole through where the pegs used to be. I then purchased a 3mm threaded bar and 9mm metal spheres that can attach to the bar. I cut the bar to the size I'd previously measured and held each side in place using a metal washer and 3mm nut. I later superglued this arrangement in place to stop it spinning around or becoming loose. As much as I would have loved to add articulation to the elbow and knee joints, unfortunately these sections just fit too tightly together to allow for movement. I didn't want to spend 100 hours sanding these gaps or have to reprint the forearms and lower legs at bigger sizes for this project, so instead I just cut the circular hinges in half. This allowed the upper and lower pieces to fit together more easily, and I superglued them in place. To fill the voids that were left, I used wooden dowels to make fake immovable hinge pins and used milliput to fill any remaining gaps. I did this process on each arm and again on each leg. These cavities at the top of the legs are where we'll be adding the hip articulation joints. The articulation joints for this file came in 2 halves, that you're meant to wrap around the spheres and then glue together. I didn't want to risk printing these in resin as it can be quite brittle, so instead I joined these 2 halves together using Tinkercad. I loaded the articulation joints, along with the shoulder joints that failed earlier, into Orca Slicer, and sliced them for printing on my Elegoo Neptune 3 Plus FDM printer. I want to point out that only 4 of the articulation joints are needed, but I printed 8 so I could test various forms of connecting them together. After quite a bit of testing, I found the best way to attach these articulation points together was by heating them up with a hairdryer to make them soft enough to fit over the spheres. I then added a small bit of hot glue to the spheres and quickly added the articulation joint over the spheres before they cooled. Without the hot glue, the articulation was too loose, and the figure would not hold a pose. So, here's what we're left with at the end of part 1, a lot of grey and black pieces. In my next video, we'll be painting Insaniac, assembling him together, and making his accessories. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, and if you want to see part 2, or more projects like this in the future, I'd be super grateful if you subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching.